you did! I never touched you. One slap exposed a lie built on power. Remember your position.
She didn't spill it. I saw everything.
The lobby cameras caught it. Truth had been watching.
She destroyed nothing. You ended this when you decided her dignity was worth less than your dress. Cole Heritage Architecture belongs to Amara and Jabari Cole.
That was my father's company.
Circumstances can change your position. They cannot decide who you are.
Before the truth came out, she was invisible. Just keep moving.
Every morning, she protected a building owned by people who never saw her.
Someone could get hurt.
Too close to the mechanical shaft.
Who are you talking to?
She understood the plan.
So why was an architect hiding behind a janitor's badge?
This story began before sunrise, before anyone important arrived.
Every morning before Atlanta's glass towers caught the first light of day, Amara Cole was already inside the tallest building under construction in the city. At 5 o'clock, while executives slept behind guarded gates and architects prepared presentations in quiet apartments, Amara pushed a gray cleaning cart through unfinished corridors filled with cement dust, exposed wiring, and the cold smell of steel. Most people who entered the site after sunrise never noticed what she had done. They saw clean conference rooms, polished temporary floors, and safety signs placed beside dangerous areas. They did not see the woman who had arrived before them. They did not know that she had removed loose nails from walkways, reported leaking pipes before they became expensive problems, and moved important drawings away from windows when storms approached. To them, she was simply the janitor. Her uniform was plain. Her gloves were inexpensive. Her identification badge placed her name beneath the words Contract Cleaning Staff. No title, no office, no authority. But there was something no badge could reveal. Amara understood that building more deeply than many of the people paid to design it. She knew where the ventilation shafts passed behind the walls. She understood why the emergency staircases had been widened on the lower levels. She could recognize the difference between a harmless crack in temporary plaster and a structural warning that required immediate attention. Sometimes, when no one was watching, she stopped beside the architectural drawings and studied them with the concentration of someone reading a letter from a lost part of her life. The 72-story tower was the greatest project in the history of Adeyemi Development Group. It was expected to become a new symbol of downtown Atlanta, containing offices, residences, restaurants, and a public observation level overlooking the city. The man responsible for delivering it was Malik Adeyemi, the young executive expected to inherit the company. Malik came from a Nigerian-American family whose success had been built over 3 generations. His grandfather had begun with a small contracting business. His father had expanded it into commercial development. Malik had studied engineering and finance, then returned to Atlanta, determined to prove that he was more than a wealthy heir with a respected surname. Unlike many executives, he visited construction sites before meetings began. He believed buildings revealed their problems in the early morning, before workers covered mistakes and managers prepared explanations. That was why he kept seeing Amara. At first, she was only a familiar figure moving quietly through unfinished spaces. Malik noticed that she worked faster than the others, without appearing rushed. He noticed that workers greeted her with respect. He noticed that she remembered which areas were unsafe and warned new employees before supervisors did. Then, one morning, he saw her standing in front of the evacuation plans. A redesign had been proposed for one of the secondary staircases. The architectural team wanted to move it closer to a service shaft, reducing maintenance costs and creating more rentable space. The discussion had delayed approval for nearly a week. Amara stood alone before the drawings, studying the route from the upper floors to the exterior exits. Believing no one was nearby, she quietly observed that placing the staircase nearer the service shaft would save money, but the existing design created a safer separation from the building's mechanical systems during a major fire. Malik stopped behind her. It was not a guess. It was the exact issue his architects had been debating. When he asked whether she had studied architecture, Amara's expression changed immediately. The confidence disappeared from her eyes. She lowered her gaze, returned her attention to the cleaning cart, and explained only that she had read a few things. Malik did not believe her. People did not accidentally understand smoke separation, evacuation flow, and service core maintenance. But Amara gave him no further explanation. She simply said that life did not always unfold according to the plans people made, and that whatever position a person occupied, there was still dignity in continuing forward. That answer stayed with Malik. From that day, he watched more carefully. He saw Amara replace a damaged warning sign near an unsecured opening before an inspector arrived. He heard her suggest that workers cover a shipment of porous stone before heavy rain. He discovered that she had rearranged a set of documents left in the wrong order, preventing a subcontractor from using an outdated specification. Each time Malik asked how she knew what to do, Amara minimized her knowledge. She had once read about it. She had overheard someone discussing it. She had simply noticed something strange. Malik began leaving technical reports in the morning conference room, not as a test, but because he was curious whether she would look at them. The reports returned to the table exactly where he had placed them, but occasionally a page corner was folded beside a calculation or design note that later proved important. Amara never admitted doing it. Her silence intrigued Malik, but it also disturbed him. He had met people who exaggerated minor abilities to gain influence. Amara possessed obvious knowledge and worked hard to hide it. The reason was not lack of ambition. It was pain. Years earlier, before uniforms and cleaning carts, Amara had been one of the strongest architecture students at her university. She grew up in a house filled with models, sketchbooks, and conversations about the responsibility of design. Her father, Kwame Cole, had founded Cole Heritage Architecture, a respected Atlanta firm known for combining contemporary structures with principles drawn from West African architecture. Kwame believed that buildings shaped how people understood their own worth. He rejected the idea that affordable housing needed to be colorless or humiliating. He argued that schools should inspire children before a teacher spoke a single word. He believed hospitals should be designed not only for efficiency, but also for hope. Amara spent her childhood beside his drafting table. While other children saw lines and measurements, she saw neighborhoods, courtyards, and homes waiting to exist. Kwame taught her that concrete could carry memory. He showed her how Ghanaian compounds used shared courtyards to strengthen community, and how shade, airflow, and orientation could reduce dependence on expensive cooling systems. By the time Amara entered university, professors already recognized that she had inherited more than her father's name. She inherited his eye. Her designs were practical without being cold. She understood structure, but she also understood emotion. She could explain why an entrance made a person feel welcome, or why a badly placed hallway could make a family feel trapped inside its own home. Her mother, Adwa, handled much of Cole Heritage's administration. Together, Amara's parents built a company that was never the largest in the city, but was respected for integrity and cultural vision. Amara expected to graduate, join the firm, and eventually lead it with her younger brother, Jabari. Then, during her final year of university, everything ended in a single night. Her parents died in a highway collision while returning from a project meeting. Amara was 22. Jabari was 14. Grief had barely entered their home before other people began discussing ownership. Kwame's brothers Desmond and Kellen presented themselves as protectors. They promised to manage the company while Amara completed her studies. They claimed that the business faced serious debt and required immediate restructuring. Amara was too devastated to examine every document. She was planning a funeral, comforting a child who woke crying for his parents, and trying to understand how a house could become silent so quickly. Desmond and Kellen took advantage of that silence. They worked with an attorney who had once advised Cole Heritage. Documents were altered, signatures were copied, ownership transfers appeared with dates that suggested Kwame had surrendered his shares before his death. The brothers claimed that Amara's parents had borrowed heavily against the business and that family shares had been used to protect the company from collapse. Within months, Amara and Jabari were removed from the family home. The company remained under the Cole name, but the children of its founder owned nothing. Amara tried to fight. She contacted attorneys and brought every paper she could find. Some believed her story, but requested fees she could not afford. Others warned that proving fraud would require original documents that had disappeared from the company office. A box containing her father's private records vanished before she could recover it. Employees who might have helped were threatened with dismissal. One accountant agreed to meet Amara, then stopped answering calls. Desmond and Kellen understood that justice was expensive. They did not need to prove they were right. They only needed to make it impossible for Amara to continue. Her university tuition went unpaid. Scholarships covered part of the cost, but not enough. She attempted to work while completing her final projects, but Jabari still needed a guardian, food, transportation, and stability. Amara left school 1 year before graduation. At first, she believed the interruption would be temporary. She worked in a building supply store during the day and served meals at night. When those wages were not enough, she joined a commercial cleaning company that assigned her to construction sites before sunrise. Months became years. Her old classmates graduated, joined respected firms, and posted photographs beside projects they had helped design. Amara cleaned the offices where architects discussed work she had once dreamed of doing. She never told Jabari how much she had sacrificed. He knew they had lost the company. He knew money was limited. But Amara protected him from the full truth. She did not want a 14-year-old boy to believe his education had destroyed his sister's future. She attended his school meetings after working double shifts. She helped with applications. She encouraged him to study engineering because he loved machines and mathematics. When Jabari received admission to a respected university, Amara celebrated as though a door had opened for both of them. Then she saw the tuition amount. She had saved for years, but it was not enough. The only valuable object Amara still possessed was her father's watch. Kwame had worn it while presenting his first major project. It was not important because of its price. It was important because Amara remembered the way it rested on his wrist as he drew measured and pointed toward futures that had not yet been built. Shortly before his death, Kwame had given it to her. He wanted her to remember that no matter how low life pushed her, circumstances could never decide who she was. Amara kept the watch wrapped inside cloth at the back of a drawer. On the day she carried it to a pawn shop, she stood outside for nearly an hour. She could have told Jabari that university needed to wait. She could have kept the final object connecting her to her father. Instead, she sold it. Jabari's tuition was paid. Amara returned to work the next morning before sunrise. No one at the construction site knew what she had done. No one knew that the woman removing dust from conference tables had once won academic design competitions. No one knew that she could have completed her degree if one honest person had protected her inheritance. No one knew that every time she passed architectural drawings, she was walking beside the life stolen from her. Malik only knew that she was hiding something. His growing attention did not remain unnoticed. Malik was engaged to Zuri Okafor, a woman whose name appeared regularly in Atlanta society magazines. Zuri came from a wealthy Nigerian family and understood the language of influence. She attended charity events, hosted private dinners, and maintained relationships with designers, journalists, and business leaders. Her public image was polished carefully. She donated clothes to women's organizations when cameras were present. She spoke about dignity and empowerment during interviews. She posted messages about kindness beneath photographs taken inside luxury hotels. Among people she considered important, Zuri appeared gracious. Among workers, driver's assistants, and service staff, she behaved very differently. She did not see cruelty as cruelty when it was directed downward. She saw it as order. In Zuri's mind, everyone belonged in a particular place. Executives spoke, employees listened. Wealthy people made mistakes. Poor people apologized for noticing. The first time she saw Malik discussing a blueprint with Amara, she assumed he was giving instructions. The second time, she realized he was listening. That difference disturbed her. Malik rarely showed open admiration. Yet when Amara explained why certain materials would deteriorate near a drainage area, he paid attention as though her opinion mattered. Zuri watched him bring Amara coffee one cold morning after learning that the cleaning team had arrived before the heating system was active. He brought coffee for the entire team. Zuri saw only the cup handed to Amara. Jealousy did not grow from fear of losing Malik's love. Zuri had never fully understood love without ownership. What frightened her was the possibility that a woman with no visible status could command respect she believed belonged exclusively to people like her. She began testing Amara. At first, the humiliation was subtle. Zuri left trash on surfaces Amara had just cleaned. She criticized areas outside Amara's responsibility. She spoke to her with exaggerated slowness as though cleaning work revealed a lack of intelligence. Amara endured it. Losing her job would threaten Jabari's tuition and rent. She had survived worse treatment from people with less power. Then Zuri became bolder. One morning, after Amara prepared the main meeting room for an important presentation, Zuri entered holding an uncovered cup of coffee. She looked at the spotless table, then deliberately poured the drink across the surface and watched it spread toward the project documents. Amara moved quickly enough to save the drawings. Zuri reminded her that cleaning spills was the reason she was employed. Several workers saw what happened. No one spoke. They knew Zuri was expected to become part of the Adeyemi family. On another day, she dropped a stack of reports directly in front of Amara and ordered her to pick them up. When Amara knelt, Zuri warned her not to mistake Malik's kindness for romantic interest. She made it clear that a man like Malik would never choose a woman who pushed a garbage cart. Amara stood slowly. She explained that she expected nothing from Malik and only wished to perform her work. Zuri told her to remember her position. The words reached deeper than Zuri understood. Amara had spent years being told that her present circumstances revealed the limit of her worth. Desmond and Kellen had treated her lack of money as proof that she did not deserve justice. Attorneys had treated her inability to pay as though it weakened the truth. Employers had looked at her cleaning uniform and assumed she had never possessed a dream larger than survival. Amara wanted to answer. She wanted to tell Zuri that a uniform was not an identity. She wanted to explain that people sometimes stood in low places because others had pushed them there. But Jabari's next tuition payment was due. Amara picked up the reports. Afterward, a carpenter named Mr. Ellis found her alone in a storage corridor. He had worked construction for 30 years and had seen talented people ignored because they lacked the right clothing accent or connections. He told Amara that remaining silent did not make Zuri's behavior acceptable. Amara understood, but dignity was easier to defend when rent was not waiting. Malik sensed that something was wrong. Amara's manner changed whenever Zuri entered a room. Workers became quiet. The cleaning supervisor avoided certain areas during Zuri's visits. Malik asked Amara directly whether anyone had mistreated her. She denied it. Her agreement with the cleaning contractor could be ended without explanation. She had no proof, and she feared being blamed for conflict between an executive and his fiancée. Malik did not force her to speak, but he began watching Zuri more carefully. Small contradictions appeared. Zuri praised workers during public tours, then complained privately when she had to share an elevator with them. She spoke about community investment, but objected to adding affordable public space to the tower because it might attract people who did not fit the building's image. Malik had noticed these traits before, but he had excused them as impatience. Now he began to wonder whether he had mistaken performance for character. The closer the tower came to completion, the greater the pressure became. 3 years of construction had consumed hundreds of millions of dollars. Investors expected a perfect grand opening. The media would attend, city officials, architects, and business leaders would gather inside the completed lobby. For Malik, the evening represented more than a building. It would demonstrate that he was ready to lead the company. For Zuri, it represented something else. She believed the grand opening would establish her publicly as the future woman beside the next head of the Adeyemi Empire. Amara and the cleaning team were assigned to prepare the lobby conference floor and reception spaces. For 4 nights they worked past midnight. Amara polished the stone beneath a suspended sculpture, corrected place cards that event staff had arranged incorrectly, and noticed that one decorative panel near the stage had not been secured. The panel was repaired before guests arrived. No one placed her name in the event program. She did not expect them to. On the afternoon of the opening, Amara changed into a clean uniform and tied her hair back. She planned to remain near the service corridor during the reception, responding only if the event team needed assistance. Zuri saw her near the center of the lobby. The sight irritated her immediately. Amara had helped several architects locate presentation materials. Malik had thanked her in front of them. One senior designer had even asked for her opinion about a display model. Zuri decided that gratitude was becoming dangerous. She took a tray of red wine from a passing server and approached Amara. Dozens of guests were nearby. Investors spoke beneath the lights. Cameras recorded the room. Malik stood near the opposite side of the lobby, greeting city officials. Zuri waited until Amara turned. Then she drove her shoulder into the tray and pushed it toward her own white dress. The glasses fell. Red wine spread across the fabric. Before Amara understood what had happened, Zuri cried out loudly enough to silence the nearest conversations. She accused Amara of carelessness. Amara stated that she had not touched her. Zuri did not allow the truth to develop. She struck Amara across the face. The sound traveled across the marble lobby. Every conversation stopped. Amara's hand rose slowly to her cheek. The physical pain was less powerful than the humiliation. She saw architects she respected, executives who had ignored her, and workers who knew the truth but feared speaking. Zuri demanded to know whether Amara understood the value of the ruined dress. The question revealed everything she believed. A dress had a price. Amara's dignity did not. Zuri ordered security to remove her and ensure that she never worked on another Adeyemi project. 2 guards moved forward reluctantly. Malik began crossing the lobby. Before he reached them, a child stepped from the crowd. Her name was Nia. She was 9 years old and had attended with her aunt, one of the project's largest investors. Nia's hands were shaking, but she said she had seen what happened. She explained that Amara had not caused the spill. Zuri had moved the tray into herself and then struck Amara. Zuri dismissed the accusation immediately. She claimed that a child could not understand an adult situation. But children often see clearly because they have not yet learned which truths are socially inconvenient. An event technician remembered the security cameras. The lobby contained several cameras installed to protect guests and artwork. A recording was accessed and projected onto the large screen behind the stage. The entire room watched in silence. The footage showed Zuri looking toward Amara before approaching. It showed the deliberate movement of her shoulder. It showed the tray tilt toward the white dress. It showed Amara's hands remaining at her sides. Then it showed the slap. There was no confusion, no misunderstanding, no explanation. Zuri's face lost its color. For years, she had controlled situations by controlling the story. Employees rarely had evidence. Workers feared consequences. Publicly, she remained generous and elegant. Now, 80 influential people were watching proof of who she became when she believed no one important was looking. Malik stopped in front of her. Zuri reached for him, but he withdrew his hand. She attempted to explain that stress had overwhelmed her. She suggested that Amara had been disrespectful for months. She implied that the situation was being exaggerated because of a single mistake. Malik did not raise his voice. He asked why stress had never caused her to strike an investor. Why had frustration never made her pour wine on a city official? Why did her loss of control always seem to target someone who could not damage her reputation? Zuri understood that the room had turned against her. She accused Malik of destroying their future over a janitor. Malik answered that Amara had not destroyed anything. Zuri had ended their future the moment she decided wealth gave her permission to degrade another human being. He removed the engagement ring from her hand and placed it on a nearby table. The engagement ended before the same audience Zuri had expected to witness her triumph. For the first time that evening, Amara felt no satisfaction. She felt exhausted. She had wanted only to finish her shift, receive her wages, and return home. Instead, she had become the center of an event designed for people who rarely noticed her. Zuri left the building through a side entrance while cameras followed. Malik apologized to Amara publicly. She accepted the apology but made it clear that he was not responsible for another adult's cruelty. What mattered was what happened next. Malik agreed. He asked her to remain because the event was not finished. Amara assumed he wanted to discuss compensation or her job. Instead, Malik walked onto the stage and announced that there was another truth the evening needed to hear. Months earlier, Adeyemi Development had begun negotiations to purchase an architectural company facing bankruptcy. The firm had once been respected for culturally grounded design. In recent years, however, it had lost major clients, accumulated debt, and dismissed many of its most talented employees. Its name was Cole Heritage Architecture. The moment Malik spoke the name, Amara stopped breathing. For years, she had avoided passing the company's office. She could not bear seeing her father's name above a business controlled by the men who had stolen it. Malik explained that during the acquisition review, he had examined historical ownership records. Several signatures appeared inconsistent. Dates conflicted. One transfer document claimed Kwame Cole had signed papers in Atlanta on a day when travel records proved he had been presenting a project in Ghana. The irregularities led Malik to order an independent investigation. He had not informed Amara because he needed facts before creating hope. For months, forensic accountants, document examiners, and attorneys traced the company's ownership. Former employees were interviewed. Archived email servers were recovered. Bank transfers connected Desmond and Kellen to the attorney who prepared the false documents. The most important discovery came from an old storage facility. A retired office manager had preserved boxes of records after being dismissed. Among them was a copy of Kwame Cole's true will, witnessed legally and filed before the documents presented by his brothers. The will gave controlling ownership of Cole Heritage Architecture to Amara and Jabari. Desmond and Kellen had never been rightful owners. They had stolen the company from two grieving children. Malik invited Amara onto the stage. Her legs felt weak. He handed her a folder containing copies of the will, financial evidence, and the legal petition prepared to restore the shares. Amara recognized her father's handwriting immediately. Small notes appeared beside several clauses. Kwame had always annotated important papers because he distrusted documents that did not explain the human reason behind them. The handwriting was real. For years, Amara had wondered whether grief had damaged her memory. Desmond and Kellen had repeated their lies so confidently that she sometimes questioned whether her father had truly intended the company for her. The pages in her hands proved that she had not imagined the betrayal. Malik explained that Adeyemi Development would no longer complete the acquisition under the fraudulent ownership structure. Instead, it would support the legal restoration of the company to Kwame's children. Desmond and Kellen would face civil and criminal action. The announcement stunned the room. The woman Zuri had called a replaceable janitor was the rightful heir to an architectural firm. But Malik was not finished. He explained that during construction, Amara had identified a weakness in the tower's evacuation planning. Months earlier, she had noticed that a proposed change near the service core could create smoke control complications. Malik passed her observation to the design team without initially revealing its source. The architects reviewed the issue and discovered a serious problem. Correcting it before construction advanced saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars and improved emergency safety for every future occupant of the building. Amara had also noticed material storage errors, drainage risks, and outdated specifications. Her ideas had already shaped the tower. She had contributed while receiving neither title nor credit. Malik offered her a future role as co-owner and creative director of Cole Heritage Architecture once ownership was restored. The guests began applauding. Amara did not accept immediately. She knew applause could be dangerous. Public sympathy often created offers that disappeared once attention moved elsewhere. More importantly, she had not completed her degree. She refused to become a symbol placed in leadership because people felt guilty about what had happened. Amara explained that she could not accept a professional title she had not yet earned. She did not want pity disguised as opportunity. Malik respected the answer. He clarified that the role would not be ceremonial and would not begin without proper preparation. Adiemi Development would fund the legal restoration of the company because it had benefited from the investigation, not because Amara owed anything in return. He also offered support for her to complete her education, but only under a transparent professional development agreement available to future company leaders. Amara's talent, he insisted, had never been the missing element. The missing element had been access. The door had been closed by fraud, poverty, and people who profited from her silence. Opening it was not charity. It was correction. Amara looked around the lobby. Minutes earlier, some guests had watched security approach her as though she were disposable. Now the same people were studying her with respect. The transformation unsettled her. She was the same woman before Malik revealed the documents. The evidence did not create her intelligence. The inheritance did not create her dignity. The only thing that changed was what powerful people knew. That realization became more important to Amara than the applause. She thanked Malik but stated that any return to Cole Heritage needed to honor the employees harmed by her uncles. She would not reclaim a company only to repeat the same hierarchy that had allowed workers to remain silent while cruelty occurred. Mr. Ellis, the carpenter, who had encouraged her to speak, began applauding first. The workers joined him, then the architects, then the investors. This time the applause did not feel like surprise at discovering that a janitor had hidden value. It felt like recognition that the value had existed all along. The legal battle began immediately. Desmond and Kellen denied everything. They accused Malik of manipulating the situation to avoid paying for the acquisition. They claimed that Amara had influenced him through a personal relationship. They portrayed themselves as relatives who had rescued a failing company after Kwame's death. Their story collapsed under evidence. Forensic analysts proved the signatures were copied. Bank records showed payments to the former attorney. Emails revealed discussions about removing Amara before she became old enough to challenge the restructuring. One message from Kellen described her as a grieving girl who would eventually become too poor to fight. That sentence became central to the prosecution. It exposed the true foundation of their plan. They had not believed their fraud was legal. They believed poverty would make the law irrelevant. Former employees came forward after seeing the grand opening video. The accountant who had once agreed to meet Amara admitted that Desmond threatened to destroy his career. An administrative assistant revealed that she had copied original records before they disappeared. The evidence grew. Cole Heritage entered temporary court supervision. Amara's ownership claim was recognized while the criminal case continued. Returning to the company's office was harder than she expected. The reception area still displayed one of her father's earliest models. His name remained on the wall, but the values behind it had been stripped away. Desmond and Kellen had replaced community projects with developments offering higher fees and lower standards. They had weakened the firm's reputation, underpaid junior designers, and used company accounts to support private luxuries. Amara found her father's old office converted into an executive lounge. The drafting table was gone. The shelves had been filled with awards her uncles purchased through sponsorships. She stood there for a long time, grieving not only the parents she lost, but the years the company had lived without them. Several longtime employees approached carefully. Some apologized for failing to protect her. Amara listened without pretending the past did not matter. A few had been afraid. Others had remained because they needed health insurance or had children depending on them. Some had convinced themselves that the ownership dispute was none of their concern. Amara did not condemn everyone equally. Fear and greed were not the same. But she made one principle clear. Cole Heritage could not honor Kwame Cole while punishing people for telling the truth. A new ethics policy protected employees who reported misconduct. Financial decisions became transparent. Junior staff received representation in planning meetings. The company created paid apprenticeship opportunities for students from families unable to support unpaid internships. Amara had not yet completed her degree, so she refused to approve architectural work beyond her legal qualifications. Instead, she became a design advisor and owner in training. She studied beside experienced architects, reviewed projects, and returned to university for her final year. Her schedule became exhausting. She attended classes during the day, worked at Cole Heritage in the afternoon, and continued occasional shifts with the cleaning company for several weeks until her replacement was trained. Malik told her she no longer needed to clean the tower. Amara knew that. She continued briefly because she did not want the other workers punished by her sudden absence. She also refused to behave as though the work had become shameful now that people knew her inheritance. Cleaning had fed her brother. It had kept a roof above them. It had placed her inside buildings where she continued learning. The job was not an embarrassment. The injustice was that people believed it gave them permission to treat her as less human. The video of Zuri striking Amara spread across the internet. Millions watched it. At first, public attention focused on the broken engagement. Entertainment programs discussed Malik's decision. Commentators debated whether ending the relationship publicly had been too severe. Then former assistants began sharing their experiences. One described being dismissed after asking to attend her mother's funeral. A driver revealed that Zuri forced him to wait through the night because she did not want to pay for a second trip. A stylist recalled Zuri insulting workers during charitable campaigns while presenting herself as an advocate for women. Brands ended contracts. Organizations removed her from leadership roles. Zuri attempted to release an apology, but the message focused on the damage to her own reputation. She described the incident as a moment that did not represent her true character. The public saw the contradiction. Character was not what someone claimed during an apology. Character was what appeared when they believed consequences were impossible. Amara refused interview requests, asking her to celebrate Zuri's downfall. She understood the difference between justice and revenge. Justice required accountability. Revenge required enjoyment. Amara wanted no part in turning another woman's collapse into entertainment, even if that woman had humiliated her. When asked publicly, Amara said only that the most important question was not why Zuri had been punished, it was why so many people had seen similar behavior before and remained silent. That question reached the construction industry. Workers began discussing treatment that had long been normalized. Cleaning contractors demanded clearer protections. Adeyemi Development introduced policies allowing all site workers, including temporary staff, to report misconduct directly to independent officers. Malik accepted criticism for not investigating earlier. He had noticed warning signs and allowed personal loyalty to delay action. Ending the engagement did not erase that failure. He needed to become the kind of leader who responded before cruelty became public. His relationship with Amara developed slowly. At first, gratitude and attention made everything complicated. Amara did not want people to believe her future had been created through romance. Malik did not want to become another powerful man whose help carried unspoken expectations. They established boundaries. Business discussions occurred with attorneys and advisors present. Cole Heritage's partnership with Adeyemi Development was reviewed independently. Amara's tuition support was documented as part of a company leadership scholarship rather than a private gift. Outside work, they began talking as two people. Malik learned how Amara measured time through responsibility. She remembered life according to tuition deadlines, rent due dates, and Jabari's school years. Amara learned that Malik's confidence concealed pressure. He had grown up surrounded by expectations and had almost married someone he did not fully respect because the relationship seemed suitable to his family. Neither rescued the other. They challenged each other to stop living according to fear. Malik encouraged Amara to recognize that accepting support did not erase independence. Amara encouraged Malik to understand that authority did not automatically create moral courage. Jabari knew little about the watch Amara had sold. He believed she had used savings for his tuition. Only after Amara's story became public did one of her friends reveal the sacrifice. Jabari was devastated. He had spent years studying, while his sister carried the consequences alone. He considered leaving university and finding full-time work. Amara refused. She had not sacrificed her future so he could destroy his out of guilt. She wanted him to complete his education and use it responsibly. Jabari remained in school, but he began working evenings. He saved every amount he could. He contacted the pawn shop and discovered that the watch had been sold to a collector. Finding it required months. He traced the sales record, contacted the buyer, and explained the history. The collector initially refused to sell. Jabari continued saving. Eventually, after learning more about Kwame Cole and the restored company, the collector agreed to return the watch for the original purchase amount rather than its increased market value. Jabari did not tell Amara. He waited until her graduation. 1 year after the night Zuri struck her, Amara walked across a university stage in an academic gown. She was older than most students in her graduating group. She had spent years believing that difference represented failure. Now she understood that delayed dreams were not dead dreams. The audience included employees from Cole Heritage, workers from the Adeyemi Tower, professors who remembered her early talent, and members of the cleaning team who had watched her study during breaks. Malik sat beside Jabari. After the ceremony, Jabari handed Amara a small box. She recognized the watch before opening it completely. For a moment she could not speak. Jabari explained that she had sold it so he could continue his dream. He wanted to return it because her dream had always mattered too. Amara fastened the watch around her wrist. It no longer represented only loss. It carried the years between the person she had been and the person she had fought to become. She remembered her father's belief that circumstances could never decide her identity. For a long time, Amara thought that lesson meant she needed to remain strong without help. Now she understood it differently. Remembering who she was did not require pretending she had never been hurt. It required refusing to let hurt become the final architect of her life. Desmond and Kellen were convicted of fraud, forgery, embezzlement, and conspiracy. They received prison sentences and were ordered to repay stolen funds. During sentencing, both attempted to apologize. Desmond claimed that he had acted to protect the company. Kellen insisted that greed had gradually changed decisions that began with good intentions. Amara listened. She did not believe forgiveness required pretending their explanations were true. They had not made a single desperate mistake. They had maintained a lie for years, watched 2 children struggle, and continued spending money that did not belong to them. Amara did not ask for harsher punishment. She also did not ask the court for mercy. She allowed the consequences to remain connected to the choices that created them. Whether she would forgive them privately was a question she refused to answer for the public. Forgiveness, she believed, was not a performance owed to people who enjoyed inspirational endings. It was a personal process that could exist without restored trust. Cole Heritage architecture was rebuilt carefully. Amara did not attempt to recover its reputation through glamorous projects. Her first major proposal focused on affordable housing for working families near public transportation. Several investors considered it too modest for the firm's return. Amara disagreed. She remembered the apartments she and Jabari had lived in after losing their home. Small windows, unreliable heating, and corridors designed as though poor families required only shelter, not dignity. Her design created courtyards where children could play safely. Apartments used natural light and cross-ventilation. Shared spaces allowed residents to gather without expensive facilities. Patterns inspired by Ghanaian architecture appeared in screens, brickwork, and shaded walkways. The project did not imitate tradition superficially. It used tradition to solve modern problems. Malik helped secure financing through an independent housing partnership, but Amara led the design. At the groundbreaking, a large sign displayed her name beneath the restored Cole Heritage logo. Workers gathered near the foundation. Some had known Amara when she pushed a cleaning cart. They did not treat that history as something she had escaped. They treated it as part of the knowledge she brought. Amara understood maintenance because she had cleaned buildings. She understood worker safety because she had entered construction sites before executives arrived. She understood affordable housing because she had lived in places designed by people who never imagined themselves as residents. The years others considered wasted had given her an education no university could provide. Malik stood beside her as the first section of earth was broken. By then, their relationship was no longer a secret, but neither allowed it to define Amara's achievement. Malik did not love her because she had become an architect. He loved the discipline that existed when no one knew her history. He loved the way she protected workers after becoming powerful enough to ignore them. He loved that humiliation had not made her cruel. Amara did not love Malik because he restored her company. She loved that he had learned to examine his own failures. He had not presented himself as the hero of her story. He understood that returning stolen property was not the same as giving a gift. Their partnership grew from respect rather than rescue. At the dedication ceremony 2 years later, families entered the completed housing development. Children ran through courtyards filled with sunlight. Residents stood beside windows designed to capture morning air. Elderly tenants rested beneath shaded walkways, inspired by the communal spaces Kwame once sketched for Amara. A bronze plaque near the entrance honored Kwame and Adwa Cole. It explained that the building was dedicated to people whose dreams had been delayed but not destroyed. Amara touched the watch on her wrist. For years, she had imagined success as a return to the life stolen from her. Standing there, she realized she had built something different. She had not recovered the exact future she lost. She had created a future shaped by everything she survived. The Adiemi Tower also changed after the grand opening. Employees began referring to it as the building Amara helped save. The emergency staircase remained in its safer position. A small plaque in the service corridor recognized the construction and cleaning workers whose labor made the project possible. The plaque was not Amara's idea alone. Nia, the child who spoke at the opening, suggested it. Malik invited her to the dedication. He told her that courage was not measured by age or status. It was measured by the willingness to tell the truth when silence was easier. Nia's aunt later funded a scholarship for young women entering architecture and construction management. The scholarship prioritized students who had interrupted their education because of family responsibilities. The first recipient was a single mother working nights in a hospital kitchen. Amara met her personally. She did not tell the student that hard work guaranteed success. Amara knew that was too simple. Many hard-working people remained trapped because systems denied them opportunity. Instead, she promised that the scholarship would remove one barrier and that the student's talent would determine what came next. That distinction mattered. Amara's story was often described as proof that anyone could rise through determination. She rejected that interpretation. Determination had kept her alive. It had not restored the company. Evidence, accountability, and people willing to challenge injustice restored the company. Her success did not prove the system was fair. It proved how much talent the system nearly wasted. Years later, visitors to Cole Heritage sometimes struggled to believe its creative director had once cleaned construction sites. Amara never hid it. Her old identification badge remained framed inside her office beside her architecture license. New employees often asked why. She kept it because titles could become dangerous when people mistook them for value. The badge reminded her that she had been intelligent before anyone called her an architect. She had possessed dignity before anyone called her an owner. She had deserved respect before powerful people discovered her name. That lesson shaped every decision she made. Cleaning staff at Cole Heritage received the same access to reporting systems as executives. Their suggestions were reviewed because they often understood buildings in ways designers did not. Interns were paid, employees facing family emergencies could request support without being treated as unreliable. Amara could not correct every injustice she had experienced. She could refuse to reproduce it. Zuri disappeared from Atlanta society for a time. Years later, reports suggested that she had begun working with a private counselor and volunteering without publicity. Amara did not investigate whether the change was genuine. Redemption, if it came, belonged to Zuri's choices. Amara's healing did not depend on witnessing it. When asked whether Malik had been too harsh to end the engagement publicly, Amara avoided answering for him. She believed relationships could survive mistakes, but only when the person responsible recognized the humanity they had violated. Zuri's greatest offense was not spilling wine or ruining an event. It was the belief beneath the act. She believed Amara's lower position made humiliation safe. She believed no child would challenge her. She believed cameras would not reveal what wealth usually concealed. The consequences were poetic because the audience she used as a weapon became the audience that saw her truth. Desmond and Kellen experienced the same kind of justice. They stole Cole Heritage by assuming Amara would remain powerless. The company returned to her because the records they tried to erase survived. They used architecture to enrich themselves. Amara used it to restore dignity to families they would never have considered profitable. The watch her father gave her became a final symbol of that restoration. It had once been sold to preserve Jabari's future. It returned when Jabari became strong enough to honor hers. Nothing in Amara's life was restored without cost. That was what made it real. At the opening of her first major community center, Malik watched Amara speak to students beneath a roof inspired by Ghanaian forms. She told them that a person's current job did not reveal the full size of their dream. Some people cleaned offices while studying at night. Some drove buses while building businesses. Some cared for relatives instead of completing degrees on schedule. Some wore uniforms that caused society to stop asking who they were. But a difficult season was not an identity. A delayed opportunity was not a verdict. And humble work was never permission for humiliation. Amara did not promise that every hidden talent would eventually be discovered. That would have been dishonest. She told them that people also needed to become the ones who noticed. The world lost too much potential because powerful individuals looked only upward. Malik had noticed Amara's knowledge before he knew her history. Nia had noticed the truth when adults feared speaking. Mr. Ellis had noticed her pain before executives understood there was a problem. Each act of recognition interrupted an injustice. That was how lives changed. Not always through dramatic rescue, sometimes through a question, sometimes through evidence, sometimes through one person refusing to look away. Amara's life had been shaped by buildings, but the greatest structure she created was not made from stone or steel. It was the new understanding she built from the ruins of her past. She learned that strength did not mean endless silence. She learned that accepting help did not make her weak. She learned that forgiveness did not require surrendering justice. She learned that love was not proven by grand gestures, but by respect that remained when no audience was present. Most importantly, she learned that her father had been right. A building was never only concrete. It carried memory, hope, and human dignity. so did a life. Amara's life had been damaged by greed, delayed by sacrifice, and nearly hidden beneath a uniform others refused to see beyond. But it was never empty. Every difficult year became part of the foundation. Every sacrifice became reinforcement. Every truth spoken at the right moment became a door. And every person who chose courage over convenience added something strong enough to carry the future. The woman who once entered construction sites before sunrise eventually stood before buildings bearing her own designs. She no longer moved invisibly through rooms prepared for powerful people. She created the rooms. She decided who would be welcomed inside them. And she never forgot the workers who arrived before dawn. So before judging someone by their uniform, their income, or the work they perform today, remember Amara Cole. The person cleaning the floor may understand the building better than the people in the boardroom. The worker carrying your bags may be supporting an entire family. The woman you dismiss as uneducated may have lost an opportunity rather than lacked ability. You may be standing before someone whose future has been delayed, not defeated. Status can place a person beneath expensive lights. Money can purchase a seat at an important table. A famous name can open guarded doors. But none of those things creates character. Character appears in the way people behave toward those who cannot reward them. It appears when truth becomes inconvenient. It appears when power offers the opportunity to humiliate someone without consequences. Zuri had status, but Amara had dignity. Desmond and Kellen had control, but Amara carried the rightful legacy. Malik had authority, but he became a true leader only when he accepted responsibility for what he had failed to see. And Nia had no power at all, yet one honest child changed the direction of an entire room. That is the difference between position and worth. One is assigned by society. The other is revealed by choice. Do you believe Amara should eventually forgive the uncles who stole her inheritance, or are some betrayals too deliberate for reconciliation? And was Malik right to end his engagement in front of everyone, or should he have confronted Zuri privately after the event? Share your opinion in the comments. If you believe no human being should be judged by a job title, clothing, or current circumstances like this story, and share it with someone who needs to remember that delayed dreams can still rise. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more stories about people who were ignored, underestimated, and humiliated, only to reveal a strength the world was never prepared to see.
Don't stand too fast. You may not like what you learn. This company failed a test. Last week, I worked here under the name Ben Carter.
That is impossible. Your appearance damages this company's image. At least he has job security.
Temporary workers learn the food chain fast.
A uniform does not decide a person's value. This is what I said. The footage lacks context.
Right.
Then we will add the records.
The approval chain leads back to Victoria's division.
Victoria Brooks, Tiffany Lane, and Chad Wilkes are terminated effective immediately.
Your firing is void. Your father's care is covered by policy, not pity.
People like you should remember your place.
The sound of the slap was smaller than Caleb Vance expected. It was not dramatic like it would have been in a movie. It did not echo through the lobby like thunder. It was a short, sharp crack of skin against skin, followed by a silence so complete that even the fountain near the reception desk seemed suddenly too loud. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The analysts standing near the elevator stopped with their coffee cups halfway to their mouths. The security guard at the front desk looked down, then up as if his own eyes had betrayed him. A group of interns in matching Navy lanyards froze beside the visitor kiosk. Behind the glass walls of Vance Financial's main lobby, New York traffic kept moving as if nothing important had happened. But inside that lobby, something had broken. Victoria Brooks stood in front of Caleb with one hand still lifted. Her designer handbag hung from her other arm, a few drops of mop water darkening the leather near the gold clasp. Her face carried no shock, no regret, not even the flicker of a person realizing she had crossed a line. She looked offended that the line existed at all. Caleb was wearing a faded gray janitor's uniform with the name Ben stitched above the pocket. His temporary badge was clipped slightly crooked to his chest. His cheek burned where Victoria had struck him. And not one person in that lobby except the lawyer watching from the mezzanine and the head of internal audit standing near a column knew that the man Victoria had just slapped was the founder and CEO of the entire company. Caleb did not raise his hand to his face. He did not reveal himself. He did not say her name with the authority that could have ended her career in that instant. He simply stood there, holding the mop handle, and watched what the room would do when power was disguised as someone nobody felt required to respect. Most people did nothing. That hurt more than the slap. Then Sarah Johnson stepped forward. She was young, calm, and visibly frightened, though she did not let the fear take over her voice. She was a financial analyst on the 32nd floor. The kind of employee executives praised in performance reviews, but rarely invited into rooms where decisions were made. She had a stack of folders under one arm, a pen tucked behind her ear, and the tired eyes of someone who had spent too many nights choosing between sleep and responsibility. Sarah moved between Victoria and the man everyone knew as Ben. She said Victoria owed him an apology. The lobby went even quieter. Victoria looked at Sarah as if a chair had spoken. Then, in a voice cold enough to make witnesses lower their eyes, she said, Sarah was fired. Not written up, not warned, fired, effective immediately. The reason, Victoria said, was that Sarah clearly did not fit the culture of Vance Financial. Sarah's face changed then, not because she was afraid of losing status. She did not have much status to lose. Not because she loved the office, the glass walls, or the impressive logo behind the reception desk. Because her father's cancer treatments were already draining her family faster than her salary could replenish them, and the next phase of care would cost more than $200,000. Caleb knew that too, not from gossip, not from spying on her private life. From a medical hardship request Sarah had filed 6 weeks earlier, a request that had been delayed, redirected, and buried under Victoria's office because Victoria believed personal crises made employees less reliable. So when Sarah reached for the lanyard around her neck, Caleb felt the moment press against his ribs. She could have apologized. She could have stepped back. She could have said she had misunderstood. She could have tried to survive the way people survive inside broken systems, by making themselves smaller than their conscience. Instead, Sarah unclipped her badge and placed it on the reception desk. She told Victoria that if keeping a chair required surrendering her conscience, she would rather lose the chair. Nobody clapped. Nobody came to her side. The security guard looked sick. The interns looked terrified. Tiffany from Investor Relations covered her mouth not with horror, but with the delighted shock of someone watching office gossip become entertainment. Chad from Structured Products whispered something that made her shoulders shake. Caleb looked at Sarah, then at the badge lying on the marble counter. By Monday morning, every employee in Vance Financial would be gathered inside the company's largest auditorium to welcome back the CEO they believed had been in London all week. Victoria would arrive in an ivory suit, expecting a promotion. Tiffany and Chad would sit near the front, still laughing about the fired analyst who had defended a janitor. And at exactly 9 o'clock, the doors would open. The janitor named Ben would be gone. Caleb Vance would walk in. But to understand why Caleb had put on that uniform in the first place, You have to understand the question that had been haunting him long before the slap. Caleb Vance was 33 years old when business magazines began calling him one of the most gifted young CEOs in America. He was black, brilliant, disciplined, and almost annoyingly calm under pressure. On television, he spoke with the careful clarity of a man who never wasted a sentence. In boardrooms, he could read a risk model, a negotiation room, and a nervous executive's half-answer with the same unsettling precision. Vance Financial had started as a small investment advisory firm with 3 employees and a rented office in Queens. By the time Caleb became CEO, it had grown into a national investment powerhouse, with offices in New York, Chicago, Atlanta, London, and Johannesburg. Its clients included pension funds, universities, hospitals, family offices, and public institutions that trusted Vance Financial to manage money other people depended on. Caleb did not inherit a polished empire. He inherited pressure. His father, Malcolm Vance, had built the company from nothing after years of working night security at a bank and taking finance classes during the day. Malcolm believed money was never just money. It was rent paid on time, medicine picked up before the pharmacy closed, a school staying open, a grandmother not losing the home where 3 generations had gathered for Sunday dinners. Caleb's mother, Denise, had been a nurse's aide before illness forced her to stop working. She used to tell Caleb that the most accurate test of a person's character was how they treated the people who cleaned up after them. She said anyone could be polite to a chairman. Politeness became interesting only when the person in front of you had no title to protect them. Caleb heard that sentence so often as a child that he rolled his eyes at it. Then he became a CEO and realized his mother had been giving him the key to leadership all along. At Vance Financial, Caleb built a reputation for excellence. He cleaned up reckless divisions, rejected deals that smelled profitable but predatory, and expanded the firm's community investment portfolio. Under him, profits grew, but so did scholarships, small business loan programs, and retirement security products designed for workers who had been ignored by traditional finance. From the outside, the company looked like a success story with polished floors. Inside, Caleb was less certain. The reports told one story. Employee satisfaction scores were high among executives, stable among managers, and strangely uneven among junior staff. Turnover in facilities, reception, mail services, and entry-level analyst roles was higher than it should have been. Exit interviews contained careful phrases that bothered him. Cultural mismatch, lack of respect, limited psychological safety, inconsistent leadership conduct. Those phrases were too clean. People often make pain sound professional when they fear the truth will cost them a reference. Then came an anonymous note sent through the ethics portal. It was only 5 sentences long. It said, Vance Financial praised dignity in public while allowing certain senior leaders to treat lower-paid workers like furniture. It said employees had learned which executives could be cruel without consequence. It said the CEO would never see it because everyone behaved well when he was in the room. The final sentence stayed with Caleb for weeks. It said that respect inside Vance Financial had become something people offered upward and withheld downward. Caleb printed the note and placed it in the top drawer of his desk. He read it before investor calls. He read it after leadership meetings. He read it one night at 11:30 alone in his office while cleaning staff moved quietly through the executive floor and senior managers' coffee cups sat abandoned on polished tables. That was when the question formed. If one day he was no longer CEO, if his name disappeared from the wall and his face from the magazine covers, if nobody knew what he owned or what he could do for them, would the people inside his company still treat him with respect? The question was not about vanity. It was about truth. A company can have beautiful values printed in its lobby and still run on fear. It can sponsor scholarships while humiliating the receptionist. It can publish diversity reports while treating janitors as shadows. It can call itself a family while making the lowest paid people eat outside because the break room is reserved for employees who look more important. Caleb did not want a company that behaved morally only when watched by powerful people. So he designed an audit unlike any Vance Financial had ever attempted. He did not do it recklessly. Caleb was too careful for that. He consulted General Counsel Mariah Ellis, Chief Audit Officer Daniel Okafor, and an outside employment law firm. The purpose would not be entertainment entrapment or a hidden camera stunt for public applause. It would be an internal culture audit focused on treatment of vendor staff, temporary workers, and employees with little organizational power. Security would know that a confidential audit was happening, but not the identity being used. Facilities would receive a new temporary cleaner through the vendor system. Caleb would work under the name Ben Carter, perform real cleaning assignments, follow the same rules as the staff around him, and keep notes only about conduct he personally experienced or witnessed. No private personnel files would be accessed through the disguise, no romantic relationships, no manipulation. If danger appeared, the audit would stop. Mariah hated the idea at first. She told Caleb there were easier ways to investigate. Caleb agreed, then asked whether those easier ways would reveal what people did when they believed the person in front of them could not harm or benefit them. Mariah had no clean answer to that. Daniel Okafor, who had spent 20 years auditing numbers and people, supported the plan with one condition. If Caleb found cruelty, he could not make the reveal only about his wounded pride. He would have to follow the evidence wherever it led. Caleb accepted. On Monday before sunrise, he stood in a private restroom 2 floors below the executive suite and looked at himself in the mirror. The transformation was simple, but it unsettled him. Gone was the tailored suit. Gone was the silver watch his father had worn on the day Vance Financial signed its first institutional client. Gone were the cufflinks, polished shoes, and calm armor of executive life. In their place were scuffed work shoes, a faded uniform, a temporary badge, and a cap pulled low over his forehead. He had allowed a barber to change the shape of his beard and had replaced his usual glasses with a cheaper pair that altered his face just enough. He looked like a man people might pass without seeing. That was the point. His first task was the 29th floor corridor outside client relations. He had cleaned before, though not in years. His mother had insisted that every child in her house learn how to mop, scrub, fold, polish, and leave a place better than they found it. Still, office cleaning had its own rhythm. Trash bags had to be changed quietly. Supply closets had to be restocked before anyone asked. Restrooms had to look unused even after hundreds of people used them. Spills had to disappear quickly enough for others to forget anyone had bent down to remove them. By 8:30, Caleb's back ached. By 9, people had stopped noticing him. That was the first lesson. Not cruelty, invisibility. Employees walked around his mop bucket without eye contact. Some said "excuse me" automatically. A few nodded. Most treated him like a moving object, inconvenient only if it interrupted their path. Caleb had spent years entering this same building through private elevators and watched people stand when he walked into rooms. Now he could stand 3 feet away from a managing director and hear the man discuss layoffs while complaining that the cleaning crew never remembered the good almond milk. Near reception, Victoria Brooks noticed him. Victoria was Senior Vice President of Corporate Strategy, and she carried her title like a blade. She was elegant, controlled, and widely feared. Her teams delivered results, but they also bled talent. People left her division quietly, often with vague explanations and excellent work histories. The board liked her numbers. Several executives believed she was ready for Chief Operating Officer. Caleb had not been sure. By the end of Ben Carter's first morning, he was closer. Victoria looked him up and down near the reception lounge where visiting clients waited beneath a wall of abstract art. Her gaze moved from his shoes to his temporary badge, then to the mop in his hand. She did not ask his name. She did not ask whether he needed directions. She told him not to stand near the guest area because his appearance damaged the company's image. Caleb lowered his eyes the way someone in Ben's position might have done. Victoria turned away before he could answer. That afternoon, she sent him to clean the same hallway 3 times because, as she put it, some people needed repetition before standards became natural. The floor had been cleaned the first time. It was cleaner the second. By the third, several junior employees were watching from behind glass partitions, pretending not to enjoy the discomfort. On Tuesday, Victoria ordered Ben to help clear the parking level after a courier spill, though the temperature outside had climbed into the 90s and the task belonged to a different vendor team. When he asked for water, she told him the staff break room was not for temporary workers. Caleb found a fountain near the service entrance and drank there. On Wednesday, Tiffany Lane and Chad Wilkes joined the story. Tiffany worked in investor relations, where she had mastered the bright voice of corporate hospitality without absorbing any of its meaning. Chad worked in structured products and believed sarcasm counted as intelligence when delivered in expensive shoes. They were not the most powerful people in the company, but they were fluent in borrowed power. They knew who to flatter, who to ignore, and who could be mocked without consequence. Tiffany spilled coffee across the pantry floor 5 minutes after Ben finished mopping it. It might have been an accident if she had apologized. Instead, she looked down at the brown splash, then at Caleb and said, "At least he had job security." Chad laughed. Later, he nudged a trash can over with his knee as Ben passed and asked whether cleaning people received bonuses for dramatic performances. Tiffany began calling him Mr. Mop in a sing-song voice whenever no senior executive was near. Caleb wrote nothing in the moment. He cleaned. He listened. He learned how quickly ordinary people joined cruelty when cruelty seemed socially profitable. Not everyone was cruel. That mattered too. A receptionist named Louise quietly warned him which executives complained about footprints. A security guard named Amara showed him where vendor staff were allowed to refill water bottles without being challenged. An older mailroom employee named Joseph told him to keep protein bars in his pocket because some managers treated breaks like favors instead of rights. Then there was Sarah Johnson. Caleb had seen Sarah's name in reports before, but names in reports rarely breathe. She was 28, a financial analyst in risk modeling, and one of the sharpest junior employees in the company. Her work had helped identify exposure in a municipal bond portfolio months before senior leadership caught it. She had written a proposal for an employee emergency assistance fund after noticing how many lower-level workers were one illness away from collapse. The proposal had stalled in Victoria's office. Sarah was known for being serious, but not cold. She stayed late without turning exhaustion into martyrdom. She corrected errors without humiliating people. She thanked receptionists by name. She held elevators for cleaners carrying supply bins. Small things, maybe, but small things are where culture lives before it becomes a policy. The first time Sarah defended Ben, it happened near the 32nd floor conference rooms. Victoria had found him wiping fingerprints from the glass doors before an investor meeting. She accused him of moving too slowly and told him people like him should be grateful to work in a building where excellence was expected. Several employees heard it. Most looked into their laptops with sudden devotion. Sarah stepped out of the conference room holding a binder against her chest. Her voice was calm, but it carried. She said a uniform did not decide a person's value. Every person working in that building deserved respect. For a moment, the whole hallway held its breath. Victoria smiled without warmth and told Sarah that idealism was charming in young analysts until it became a performance issue. Then she walked away. Caleb did not thank Sarah the way he wanted to. Ben would not have known what to do with that much attention. He only nodded. Sarah nodded back. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it became the beginning. The next day at lunch, Caleb found himself outside in the small courtyard behind the tower because Victoria had made it clear that temporary cleaning staff did not belong in the employee lounge. He sat on a stone bench beneath a tree, trapped in a square of city soil, and opened his paper cup of water. He had eaten breakfast too early, and the protein bar in his pocket had been given to Joseph after Joseph's blood sugar dipped mid-morning. Sarah appeared with a sandwich wrapped in brown paper. She asked if the seat was taken. Caleb almost said no in his natural voice, the CEO voice that filled rooms without effort. He caught himself and answered as Ben. Sarah sat toward the sandwich in half and offered him the larger piece. He refused at first. She told him people who refused lunch on principle usually became useless by 3 o'clock. That sounded so much like something his mother would have said that he had to look away. They ate together in the courtyard while traffic moved beyond the building. Sarah did not ask why he was a cleaner. She did not talk to him as if kindness required pity. She asked whether the work was hard on his knees. She told him her father had once worked maintenance for the subway authority and could repair almost anything except his own pride when someone talked down to him. Then she smiled sadly and said pride was not the same as dignity. Pride could be wounded by a title. Dignity lived deeper. Caleb listened. From behind the glass, Tiffany and Chad saw them. Tiffany laughed first. Chad lifted his phone as if he might take a picture, then lowered it when someone walked by. Later that afternoon, Tiffany asked Sarah if community service counted toward her performance goals. Chad said Sarah was networking with facilities now that her promotion prospects had dried up. Sarah did not defend herself loudly. She simply said, "Some people revealed more about themselves through their jokes than they realized." By Thursday, Caleb had enough evidence to confirm the ethics note. He had seen humiliation disguised as standards exclusion, disguised as professionalism, and silence disguised as neutrality. But Daniel Okafor had been right. The audit could not stop at Caleb's wounded pride. Numbers began speaking too. While Caleb worked as Ben Daniels' audit team reviewed expense approvals connected to Victoria's division, they found luxury transportation billed as client logistics for meetings clients had attended virtually. They found consulting retainers paid to a boutique advisory firm registered to Victoria's cousin. They found designer purchases described as event materials private spa charges buried under leadership retreat expenses and unusually generous vendor renewals connected to Tiffany's former employer. None of it was yet ready for public action, but the pattern was forming. The same person who believed some workers were beneath respect also believed company money existed to decorate her power. Friday was supposed to be Caleb's final day undercover. That morning, Victoria was preparing for a private board dinner where she expected to be confirmed as the leading candidate for Chief Operating Officer. She moved through the building with a sharper edge than usual, correcting flower arrangements, scolding reception about visitor badges, and reminding assistants that first impressions made money before anyone opened a spreadsheet. Ben was assigned to the main lobby just before noon. The floor had been over-polished for the board visitors, which made every footprint visible. Caleb worked near the fountain, careful with the mop, aware of the cameras, aware of Mariah Ellis watching from the mezzanine under the pretense of taking a phone call. Victoria entered through the revolving doors with Tiffany and Chad behind her. She was looking at her phone, not at the floor. Caleb moved the mop bucket back to give her space. A visitor stepped into her path and Victoria swerved sharply. Her hip struck Caleb's arm. The mop tilted. A few drops of water landed on her handbag. For one breath, the moment was nothing. A minor accident. A stain that could be wiped away. A human inconvenience. Victoria looked at the bag, then at Ben. Her expression hardened into something colder than anger. She slapped him. The lobby froze. The strike was not only physical, it was a declaration. It said she believed there were people in the building whose bodies could be corrected by force. It said the uniform had removed him from the circle of dignity. It said the witnesses would understand the hierarchy and stay quiet. Most of them did. Sarah did not. She crossed the lobby so quickly that the folders under her arm slid against her coat. She placed herself beside Ben, not in front of him like a hero posing for a poster, but close enough to make it clear he was not alone. She told Victoria the slap was unacceptable and that she owed him an apology in front of every person who had seen it. Victoria stared at her, Then she fired her. The words came clean and sharp. Sarah Johnson was no longer employed by Vance Financial. She was disruptive, insubordinate, and incompatible with the company's leadership culture. Caleb felt the old executive instinct rise in him. End this now. Say your name. Protect her. But Mariah had warned him about this exact possibility. If he revealed himself in anger, Victoria would make the story about humiliation and retaliation. The audit would become emotional theater. The deeper evidence might be compromised. Sarah's firing would still be illegal and reversible, but the process mattered because the repair had to outlive the moment. So Caleb did the hardest thing. He stayed Ben for a few more minutes. Sarah unclipped her badge with fingers that trembled only slightly. Everyone watched. Everyone understood she needed that job. Many knew about her father. People in offices always know pain when it becomes gossip, even if they pretend not to. Sarah placed the badge on the reception counter. She said if keeping a chair required surrendering her conscience, she would rather lose the chair. Then she turned to Ben and asked if he was all right. Caleb could not trust himself to answer fully. He said yes. It was not true. Not because of his cheek. That would fade. Because Sarah had just paid the price of a culture he owned. That evening, Caleb returned to the private restroom below the executive floor and removed the uniform. His cheek still carried a faint mark. He stared at himself in the mirror for a long time, half CEO, half ghost of the man people had ignored all week. Mariah entered with a folder thick enough to bend under its own weight. Daniel followed with a tablet and the expression of someone whose suspicion had become documentation. They had everything. The slap, the harassment, the break denial, the repeated mistreatment of vendor staff, the fraudulent expenses, the related party consulting payments, the retaliatory firing, the buried hardship request, the employee assistance proposal Sarah had written and Victoria had shelved. Caleb asked about Sarah. Mariah said she had been contacted by legal and told not to sign any separation documents. Her employment status would remain under review pending an emergency executive investigation. That was the careful language. Then Mariah's face softened, and she added that Sarah had gone straight from the office to her father's clinic appointment. Caleb sat down. He thought of his mother telling him that character is clearest when nobody important is watching. Then he realized the darker truth. Someone important had been watching all along. He had simply not watched from low enough. Monday morning came with polished floors and nervous whispers. Every employee in the New York headquarters had been ordered to attend the 9 o'clock all-hands meeting. The official message said Caleb Vance had returned from London with an important leadership announcement. That was enough to fill the auditorium early. Promotions were expected. Strategy shifts were rumored. Victoria's supporters arrived smiling. Victoria sat in the second row, close enough to be seen, but not so close that she looked desperate. Her ivory suit was perfect. Her handbag had been replaced. Tiffany sat 2 seats away, whispering to Chad, who kept checking his phone as if a promotion might arrive by text. Sarah was not there at first. That bothered some people more than they admitted. At 9 exactly, the side doors opened. Caleb Vance walked in, wearing a dark Tom Ford suit, a white shirt, and the silver watch that had belonged to his father. The room stood almost as one body. Chairs scraped, conversations died, faces arranged themselves into respect so quickly it was almost beautiful if you did not know what some of those same faces had looked like around a janitor's cart. Victoria stood too. Then Caleb turned slightly. Sarah entered behind him. She wore the same navy blazer from Friday, but her badge had been restored and clipped to her lapel. Her eyes were tired. Her posture was steady. Several employees stared. Tiffany's smile disappeared. Chad looked down. Caleb did not begin with jokes. He did not soften the room. He walked to the podium, looked out over the employees of Vance Financial, and let the silence stretch until people became uncomfortable inside it. Then he said the company had failed a test. A murmur moved across the auditorium. Caleb said he had spent the previous week inside the building under the name Ben Carter, working as a temporary cleaner as part of a legally supervised internal culture audit. He said the purpose had been simple: to learn whether Vance Financial's values survived when status was removed from the room. Victoria's face changed before anyone else fully understood. Tiffany turned toward Chad. Chad looked at Caleb, then at Sarah, then at the floor. Caleb continued. He said some employees had passed that test in quiet ways. Some had offered water information, ordinary courtesy and respect, without knowing anyone would ever reward them for it. Others had failed so completely that the company could no longer pretend misconduct was a matter of tone. Then the screen behind him lit up. The first clips were small. Victoria telling Ben not to stand near the guest area because his appearance damaged the company image. Tiffany spilling coffee across a freshly mopped floor and laughing. Chad tipping a trash can with his knee. Victoria blocking Ben from the employee break room. A hallway full of people watching while Sarah said a uniform did not decide a person's value. The room shifted with each clip. Some employees looked ashamed. Others looked relieved in the painful way people look when a hidden truth is finally named by someone powerful enough to survive naming it. Then the lobby footage appeared. Victoria's collision with Ben. The water on the handbag. The slap. Even people who had heard rumors were not prepared to see it. A sound moved through the auditorium, not quite a gasp, not quite speech. Victoria stared at the screen as if force of will could make it stop. The video continued. Sarah stepped forward. Sarah demanded an apology. Victoria fired her in front of the lobby. Then Sarah placed her badge on the counter. Caleb let the video end there. He did not look at Victoria first. He looked at the room. He said the most disturbing part of the footage was not only the slap, it was the silence around it. It was the speed with which people calculated their own safety and decided another person's dignity was too expensive to defend. He said fear was real, and he would not pretend courage was easy. But a company that made decency feel dangerous had already become weaker than any market downturn could make it. Victoria stood. She said the footage lacked context. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then Daniel Okafor joined him on stage. The second presentation was not emotional. That made it worse for Victoria. Numbers appeared, dates, expense categories, vendor names, approval chains, consulting payments, luxury travel falsely labeled as client development, personal purchases buried inside event budgets, a related party contract tied to Victoria's family, a hardship request from Sarah Johnson marked for review, delayed and never escalated, an employee assistance proposal dismissed as non-essential, while executive discretionary spending increased. Caleb did not need to call Victoria greedy. The records did that without raising their voice. Victoria sat down slowly. Tiffany began crying before her name appeared, which told half the room her name was coming. Chad's jaw tightened when the screen showed message logs where he and Tiffany had mocked facilities staff and discussed how to make Ben's week miserable because, in Chad's words, temporary workers should learn the food chain quickly. Caleb let the room sit with the evidence. Then he announced the decisions. Victoria Brooks was terminated for abuse of authority, workplace violence retaliation, discrimination against vendor staff, and serious violations of corporate ethics. Her expense conduct would be referred to legal authorities and the board's compliance committee. Tiffany Lane and Chad Wilkes were terminated for harassment, discriminatory conduct, retaliation, and participation in a hostile workplace pattern. Security did not drag them out. Caleb refused to turn accountability into theater. They were escorted professionally with the same procedural dignity they had denied others. That mattered. The point was not to make cruelty change sides. The point was to end it. When the doors closed behind them, the room remained standing on the edge of something unfamiliar. Caleb turned towards Sarah. He said a company could not grow through intelligence alone. It needed leaders who understood that numbers represented people and that culture was not what executives announced, but what employees risked when nobody powerful seemed to be watching. Then he said Sarah Johnson had shown more operational courage in one lobby than some executives had shown in entire careers. Sarah shook her head slightly, overwhelmed, before he even finished. Caleb continued. Her firing was void. Her record was cleared. Her benefits were uninterrupted. The board had reviewed her work, including the risk models she had built, the crisis memos others had ignored, and the employee assistance proposal Victoria had buried. Effective immediately, Sarah would become interim chief operating officer of Vance Financial with full board sponsorship, executive coaching, and authority to lead a 90-day culture and operations reform. The room erupted. Not everyone clapped for the same reason. Some clapped because they admired her, some because they were relieved, some because they wanted to be seen clapping. Sarah knew that. Caleb knew it too. Applause is not culture. It is only noise until action follows. Caleb waited for the applause to settle. Then he added one more thing. The company would immediately launch the Vance Employee Dignity Fund based on the proposals Sarah had written and Victoria had shelved. It would provide emergency support for employees and eligible family members facing medical crises, housing instability, or sudden hardship. The first approved case, already reviewed and documented, would cover the full $200,000 required for Sarah's father's next phase of cancer treatment. Sarah covered her mouth. Caleb made the room understand the difference. He said it was not a favor. It was not charity handed down from a stage. It was a policy that should have existed already, built from Sarah's own work, funded by money that would no longer be wasted on executive vanity. Her father's care would be the first case, not the last. That was when Sarah cried. She had held herself together through the slap, the firing, the weekend of uncertainty, and the impossible promotion. But the thought of her father receiving treatment without her family drowning beneath the bill reached the place she had been guarding for months. Caleb stepped away from the podium and gave her time. The room gave her silence. And this time the silence was not cowardice. It was respect. After the meeting change did not happen magically. That was the part Caleb insisted people remember. It is easy to fire a villain in front of an auditorium and call the company healed. It is harder to rebuild the habits that allowed the villain to thrive. Victoria had been extreme, but she had not been alone. She had been protected by numbers, tolerated by silence, and imitated by people who wanted proximity to power. Sarah's first act as interim COO was not to move into Victoria's old office. It was to visit the facility's break area. She went with Caleb, Mariah Daniel, and the head of human resources. The room was too small, poorly ventilated, and stocked with a coffee machine that worked only when it felt generous. Vendor staff had separate access rules, fewer meal protections, and no clear channel to report mistreatment by Vance employees without risking their assignments. Sarah listened before she promised anything. Joseph from the mailroom spoke first, then Amara from security, then two cleaners who had never expected to be asked what would make the building more humane. They talked about schedules, water access, locked restrooms, broken lockers, managers who snapped fingers instead of learning names, and the quiet humiliation of being told which elevators they should avoid when clients were present. Caleb wrote everything down himself. Within 2 weeks, Vance Financial renegotiated vendor contracts to guarantee paid breaks, safe reporting channels, and equal access to designated staff spaces. The company created a dignity hotline independent of direct management. Promotions and bonuses for senior leaders were tied to culture metrics that included feedback from reception facilities, security, mailroom, junior analysts, assistants, and temporary workers. Retaliation protections were rewritten in plain language. Every executive, including Caleb, spent 1 full day each quarter shadowing a different support function, not as performance, but as required leadership education. Sarah refused to let reform become a poster. She reviewed performance systems that had rewarded results without asking how those results were achieved. She reopened exit interviews. She invited former employees to speak confidentially about why they had left. She discovered entire teams where talented people had learned to survive by becoming quiet. That angered her. But anger did not make her sloppy. She built structures. Clear complaint paths, manager training with consequences, independent review panels, emergency assistance rules, transparent promotion criteria. She brought in Lewis from reception, Amara from security, Joseph from the mailroom, 2 cleaners, 3 analysts, and a junior associate from compliance to serve on the first Employee Dignity Council. Some executives resisted. They used polished language. They said the reforms might distract from performance. They worried about precedent. They wondered whether giving support staff formal feedback channels would create operational noise. Sarah listened, then showed them the turnover costs, legal risk, lost productivity, and client exposure created by abusive management. She did not ask them to choose kindness instead of profit. She proved that contempt was expensive. Caleb watched her lead and understood why his father had always said the best operators noticed what arrogant people dismissed as small. Sarah noticed everything. Her father's treatment began the same month. She did not announce it in the office. She did not turn his illness into a corporate story. On the morning the approval letter arrived, she sat in her car outside the clinic and cried before going inside. Her father, James Johnson, had lost weight from treatment, but his eyes were still sharp. He had worked maintenance for most of his life and had raised Sarah to believe no honest work lowered a person. When she told him what had happened, she left out the applause at first. She told him about Ben, about the slap, about the badge on the counter, about the CEO walking in on Monday. James listened without interrupting. Then he asked whether she had been afraid. Sarah said yes. He told her courage was not the absence of fear. It was fear failing to become the boss. That sentence stayed with her longer than the applause. Caleb visited James 2 weeks later, not with cameras, not with a public relations team, but with a small basket of fruit and an awkwardness money could not remove. He thanked James for raising a daughter who had protected the dignity of a stranger when everyone else was calculating risk. James studied him for a long moment. Then he asked whether Caleb had learned what he came to learn. Caleb said he had learned more than he wanted to. James told him that was usually the only kind of lesson worth keeping. Months passed. Vance Financial changed slowly enough to be real. People still made mistakes. Some managers needed more than one warning. A few left when they realized the old shortcuts would no longer be protected. But the building felt different in ways no glossy report could fully capture. Cleaners used the main staff cafe without being stared down. Executives learned names they had once treated as background. Junior employees began speaking sooner when something felt wrong. The new Dignity Fund helped an assistant avoid eviction, a security guard cover surgery for his wife, and a mailroom worker travel home when his mother had a stroke. The lobby where Victoria had slapped Caleb changed too. Not physically. The marbles stayed the same, the fountain kept running, the logo still gleamed behind the reception desk, but near the elevators, Sarah installed a simple wall engraved with a sentence from Vance Financial's new leadership standard. Respect is not a benefit of rank. It is the minimum condition of work. Caleb did not love having his own failure memorialized in the building. Sarah told him that was exactly why it needed to stay. One evening, almost a year after the audit, Caleb stayed late after a board meeting and found Sarah in the lobby speaking with a new cleaner named Marisol. Marisol was holding a supply list and explaining that one of the restrooms on the 40th floor had a leaking valve that would damage the wall if maintenance waited until morning. Old Vance Financial might have ignored her until the wall stained. New Vance Financial listened. Sarah called facilities, thanked Marisol by name, and logged the issue before leaving. It was a small moment. No applause, no cameras, no dramatic reveal. Just a company doing the ordinary, respectful thing before a crisis forced it to behave. Caleb stood near the fountain and felt something in him settle. This was what he had been looking for when he put on the uniform. Not proof that he was secretly loved. Not satisfaction that cruel people could be exposed. Proof that a place could learn to respect someone before discovering they were important. Later, when business journalists asked about Vance Financial's culture transformation, Caleb did not describe the undercover audit in detail. The public knew enough. He did not want the story reduced to a clever CEO trick. He said only that the company had been forced to confront a painful truth. Excellence without humility becomes cruelty with good branding. Sarah, when asked, was even more direct. She said, "Every company reveals its soul through the people it thinks it can afford to ignore." That became the sentence employees remembered. Victoria's case moved through legal channels. Some money was recovered. Some damage could not be. Tiffany and Chad found new work eventually, though neither returned to finance at the same level. Caleb required that termination records be accurate but not embellished. Accountability did not need extra poison. Several months after leaving, Chad sent a letter to the company Dignity Council. It was not perfect. It contained defensiveness in places, but it also named what he had done without pretending he had only been joking. Sarah read it, filed it, and did not turn it into a redemption story. Some apologies are beginnings, they are not endings. As for Victoria, she never publicly apologized. Her pride would not allow it. But the industry that once admired her sharpness began calling it risk. The same people who had praised her intensity started asking why they had mistaken fear for leadership. That question traveled farther than her name. Caleb kept the Ben Carter badge in his desk drawer beside the anonymous ethics note, not as a trophy, as a warning. Some mornings before stepping into meetings where people stood too quickly and agreed too easily, he opened the drawer and looked at both. The note reminded him why the audit had begun. The badge reminded him how little a person had to change before others felt permitted to change how they treated him. A uniform, a temporary ID, scuffed shoes. That was all it had taken for some people to forget he was human. That knowledge never stopped disturbing him. It should disturb all of us. Because most people will never run a financial empire. Most people will never sit in a boardroom deciding who becomes chief operating officer. Most people will never have the power to summon an entire company into an auditorium and reveal the truth on a screen. But everyone has moments when another person's dignity is placed quietly in their hands. The delivery driver at the door, the cleaner in the hallway, the receptionist absorbing everyone's impatience. The junior employee afraid to speak. The coworker everyone laughs at because laughing feels safer than objecting. The person wearing the uniform we have been trained not to see. Those moments are not small. They are audits. No one announces them. No one schedules them. No one tells us the cameras are rolling, but something is always being recorded, if not by technology, then by the people who remember how we made them feel when we thought their memory did not matter. Victoria failed because she believed respect was a luxury good, distributed according to rank. Tiffany and Chad failed because they wanted the comfort of belonging to the powerful more than the discomfort of being decent. The silent witnesses failed in a quieter way, and many of them had to live with that. Some changed. Some apologized. Some joined the new council. Some finally admitted that fear had made them smaller than they wanted to be. Sarah passed, but not because she knew there would be a reward. She passed when reward seemed impossible. She passed when speaking cost her the job that paid for her father's medicine. She passed when the person she defended appeared to have nothing to offer her but gratitude. That is the kind of integrity no title can manufacture. And Caleb learned that leadership is not proven by being admired from a stage. It is proven by what you build after discovering the stage hid the truth. A business can own towers, accounts funds, and influence. It can manage billions. It can impress clients with glass walls and perfect coffee and confident people in expensive suits. But if it loses the ability to honor the people who clean those glass walls, serve that coffee, secure those doors, file those reports, and carry quiet burdens into work each morning, then it is already poorer than its balance sheet admits. Clothes can create a first impression. Titles can create authority. Money can create access. But character is what remains when nobody thinks they need anything from you. So be careful how you treat the person with the mop, the badge, the tray, the cart, the clipboard, the tired eyes, or the quiet voice. Be careful how you laugh when someone else is being humiliated. Be careful what you tolerate in the name of fitting in. Because the person you dismiss today may one day change your life. And even if they never do, even if they remain exactly who they appear to be, they are still worthy of respect. If this story reminded you that every honest job deserves dignity and that character matters more than status, leave a comment saying, "Character creates value." And if you believe kindness is not weakness, but the mark of real leadership like this story, subscribe and stay close for more stories about justice, courage, and people who choose what is right when choosing wrong would be easier.